Okay, quick music disclaimer here. I do not own the rights to this music, which belongs to the rightful owner, who is the intoxicating mind of Dr. Frankenstein. So he made my intro and my outro, and I hope you guys enjoy. Check them out on Spotify and YouTube, and no copyright infringement is intended. Have a good day.
A clear choice of good versus evil, of right versus wrong.
Twisted Tales.
If you like paranormal, true crime, and some cryptids, or just anything weird, check out Ouch, Was That a Ghost? Brought to you by your host, Liz. You can find Ouch, Was That a Ghost on Spotify, Apple, or any audio platform. New episodes drop every Thursday.
Due to some violent content, parental discretion is advised.
Alright, so on today's episode, we're going to talk about the Soviet-Afghan War. So I have a guest here tonight, so we're going to record this together and talk about some stuff. So, welcome.
Hello. I'm Cozy. I'm a shit poster and failed comedian from Chicago. And I really like Soviet history.
Well, yeah, no, it's pretty cool to dive into some of this stuff. So, what do you want to talk about?
So we're talking about the Soviet-Afghan War today. It's kind of like the Soviets' Vietnam, but more horrifying if that's possible. Like, it didn't involve as many people, but a brutal, purposely forgotten conflict that took place between 1979 to 1989. What was supposed to be just another chess move in the Cold War turned into an empire crumbling from hubris and overreach. In this episode, we'll be diving into the more human aspects of the conflict and leaving the geopolitics to those more qualified. We're going to take a look at the horrors faced by tens of thousands of Soviet men whose government not only let them down, but was non-existent a few short years later. When discussing the extremes of human misery, a few places get bandied about, be it Stalingrad, the Black Death, Teutoburg Forest, slave galleries, stuff like that. And I'm just positing that this conflict makes the list. I have the utmost respect for the victims, and any attempt at levity is a vain attempt to make the subject matter more palatable to research and discuss. This vortex of human suffering is often compared to the American Vietnam War, due to the guerrilla tactic used in both conflicts, but in my opinion, it's like Vietnam's more violent, drug-addicted younger brother. Quantifying and ranking suffering is dumb, and that's not my goal. Simply using Vietnam as a reference point. In Vietnam, it's estimated 1 million Vietnamese citizens lost their lives during the American invasion. Afghanistan lost 3 million in a comparable length of time. It's almost 10% of the entire population. As with anything complex, context is important. Afghanistan is old. Being on the Silk Road and the border for the plucky desert nation fought off the Mongols. They've been invaded by the Britain 9 separate times from 1823 to 2018. This gave it the nickname the Breaker of Nations, because if you don't live there, it's too brutal for people who aren't, like, acclimatized to it. The culture hasn't changed in 200 years, give or take. I mean, it's all herders, it's all goats. And opium. It's goats and opium. England and Russia have been kind of fighting over it for the last couple hundred years. Back when England controlled India, they wanted Afghanistan as like a buffer zone between Russia and India, because Russia was in an expansionist period like they are always. So the conflict kicks off with a totally badass name, Operation Storm 333. It sounds like an underground doom metal band, but it's actually what the Soviets called the airborne Spetsnaz assault on the key points in Kabul, including the palace on Christmas Eve, 1979. I want to clear some stuff up. First, Spetsnaz is a more general term than people usually use it. It's not like a specific unit like we have the Rangers or Delta Force, or it's just like a general term for special forces.
And that's all it is.
Well, it's a broader category than most people think. There's not like a Spetsnaz unit. There's dozens of them that are specialized and like I don't, it's just what it's their word for special forces, not a particular unit.
Different divisions and shit.
Yes, absolutely. There's not many like with World War II. You have different battles and like events that happen, be it D-Day or Stalingrad or what have you. This doesn't have that. I mean, it kicks off with Operation Storm, but besides like a push into the Panjshir Valley a few years later, there's no battles. It was a pointless conflict, obviously, but it was just driving around in armored minivans after a while. The operation was marked by several odd choices. They used an awful lot of explosives on what should have been a stealth mission, and a Spetsnaz unit dressed in Afghani military uniforms for seemingly no reason, and didn't tell anyone of their costume change. This will become a pattern. More than half the casualties suffered by the Soviets over the course of the war will be from friendly fire, hazing, and drug overdose, and suicide. Soviet soldiers were more of a danger to themselves than the enemy.
And especially during this attack, too. Well, this whole Operation Storm 333, I mean, it's going to involve, like, overtaking of another country. The whole invasion here was a whole plot just to get rid of the current leader in office, and that was Hatchullah Ahmed. So he was in office in Afghanistan during the period of September 14th, 1979 to December 27th, 1979. Well, this guy served in the position for over 3 months. Now, in that time, he ran the place, and he even co-founded the Democratic Republic of Afghanistan, so the DRA. So this was the code name of an operation that took place when the Soviet Special Forces stormed the Taj Beg Palace up in Afghanistan. So this was like a military raid executed by the Soviet Union on December 27th, 1979. So I guess we'll get into this. We'll break it down. So what do you know about this?
Very little. I know it was supposed to be relatively hush-hush, and the Palace Guard had no idea what was going on. From my understanding, the Russians started a civil war on accident and then picked a side and then killed the guy on that side. I know the whole the whole operation was planned and executed in less than 2 weeks. I don't understand why they thought it was a good idea. Because like no foreign army has ever really hurt them. They've been using the same tactics that they used against the British. Harry supply lines and hide in the mountains, which fucking works.
Yeah, just hide in the bush and pick your fucking spot, right?
I think that's why there's only, like, this is the only real battle. So with an imbalance of technology, the Soviets were easily able to take Kabul and any other large cities, but it was the spaces between those the ever-armed Mujahideen held. The conflict is plagued with the same pointless battles Vietnam had, where they would send hundreds of men to die over a hill in the wilderness and then just leave it as soon as the fighting is over. Units' supply would get stolen and sold by their officers, and no one was issued socks. You weren't like given socks.
You just had to grin and bear it, put your boots on, that's it.
They had foot wraps, which sounds like incredibly uncomfortable. One of the signs, actually, in the current conflict Russia is in, that people were noticing that they're getting old Soviet issue foot wraps. The Russian soldiers are.
Yeah, no, like even wearing the whole foot wraps, I mean, that doesn't sound too comfortable. Even like when you're going on like your fucking missions or whatever too, like you're walking long distances, everything else.
It's a desert. There's sand everywhere. Just the blisters. Oh my god. The real Red God of War.
So this whole Operation 333, now this involved the Soviet Union, Red Army, USSR, whatever you guys want to know it by. So they decided to invade Afghanistan. Now, there's a few reasons for doing so. To support a communist government and suppress a nationalist uprising. Now, the invasion was part of a larger effort just to maintain like Soviet control over Central Asia. So the USSR saw Afghanistan as strategically advantageous. So they wanted to exert control over the territory here, either by using force or diplomacy. So the USSR had wanted to prevent the stem of Islamic nationalism from spreading. So some countries in the Soviet bloc had huge Muslim populations, right? So they were worried that a Muslim uprising in Afghanistan would spark others in Soviet territory and such.
It's bad for business. And a lot of those places would be like Russia went to war with Chechnya not long after this. The exact thing they were worried about happened still kind of happened, even though it wasn't like faith based. It was just Russia sucks and we're sick of being a part of you. Uh, but yeah, no, it they were kind of right in that it did spark general conflict in the area, the exact area they were worried about.
Now, this operation intended to be like a symbolic show of force, and then it quickly turned into like a gritty 10-year counterinsurgency that Moscow was never able to win. Now, the Soviet-Afghan War took place in the Democratic Republic of Afghanistan from December 24th, 1979 to February 15th, 1989. Now, this was in the city of Kabul. Now, this is the capital of Afghanistan. Now, it's situated in a strategic location alongside the trade routes of Central Asia and South Asia. So these dudes hatched up this whole operation to seize Kabul and assassinate communist Afghan leader Hafizullah Amin. First time the USSR had used its forces to invade a nation outside the Eastern Bloc 77. So Kabul had served as Afghanistan's political, cultural, and economical center for quite some time. Now it's said to actually be over 3,500 years old. So, long time.
It's such an old people.
Yeah. Like it's around for times, man.
You said they're on the Silk Road.
hmm
I mean that goes back hundreds of years, and they even fought off the Mongols.
Yeah,
That's a
like,
Boy Scout badge. In like, if nations get badges, that's definitely one. Fought off the fucking Mongols. Get out of here.
yeah, like even over the times, like Kabul's been under the rule of like various dynasties, empires, all that, like the Western Turks. Nah, even in the late 70s, like it was a big fucking stop for travelers and stuff too, because like they would go there for street sales of like hashish and stuff.
Popular with British hippies.
Yep,
They loved
yep.
Kabul.
Well, yeah, it was just a major attraction for hippies too. Like lots of folk would swing by there just to grab large quantities of hash, right? No, just
Hash and heroin.
yeah, as long as you don't get caught with that, right? And fucking end up in like a Turkish jail or something.
God damn.
Good times. Now, the USSR, being the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, this was a communist state that existed from 1922 to 1991. So they were like a transcontinental country.
You're talking about the USSR. I want to bring up the fact that not all Soviets are Russian. They span the entire width of the like Eurasian land mass. So you have Soviets that have more Asian features. You have some that look Arab, and then you have like I guess the more white version as well. Like it's not an ethno state. There's a bunch of different kinds of colors of Soviets. Most of the enlisted weren't the white kind of Soviet because the government knew if they conscripted from places like St. Petersburg or Moscow, that people would be more likely to protest and revolt. Like the similar thing happened in Vietnam. Nobody really had a problem with it until they started seeing the caskets coming home.
And there were a lot of troops that like went along with this whole operation too. Be familiar with any of them, or
Well, they worked on a 2-year conscription. And so your first year, you were hazed brutally, 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 like to the point where you might die. Uh, and then I forgot the Russian word for it, but you would become a grandfather, they called it. So you would become the bully. Like I'm like brutal beatings with like weapons and stuff. Uh, People died. The gas mask thing, I think, is just kind of funny, but that actually happened. That was what one unit did to all of their people. Put you in a gas mask, plug up all the holes, and then make you run until you passed out. And a lot of people got really hurt doing that. Mind you, about half of them are on heroin. Half of like everybody. So the main workhorse unit for the Soviets during the long parts of the war were the motor rifle battalions. It's about 10,000 guys, and they're given a bunch of machine guns and what is basically just a minivan wrapped in tinfoil, and they'd go on patrols. It's basically just driving around until you get shot at, and then you shoot back with the biggest guns imaginable. The Soviets have always been known for their artillery and has earned itself the nickname the Red God of War, which is like that's fucking cool. Like that's a good nickname. Uh, and that was the strategy. You drive around until you get shot at, and then level whatever village the bullets came from. A lot of civilians died this way, like 3 million of them. Uh,
that's a lot.
yeah. Um, Another tactic the Soviets would like to do was landmines. You can see this in Ukraine today. I don't know if you've seen pictures of them. They're these little plastic flappy things. It looks like a toy. And they're not designed to kill, they're purposefully designed to maim because maiming takes more people out of combat. If your buddy's hurt, you have to carry him somewhere safe. So that takes you out of the fight too. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It was rough because a lot of these times it's an ambush, and the Mujahideen learned quickly that L-shaped ambushes are the best. So then you don't fire into your own men and you get the most coverage, I guess you could say. What they would do is blow up the first vehicle and the last vehicle and take their time pulling the patrol apart. Once they were given Stingers, they couldn't even get air support. So that's a whole other ordeal. The Stinger came in 85, 86. It was near like near the middle end. But that air power and artillery are the two things the Soviets had buckets of. And without it, again, it was just dudes driving around in a tinfoil wrapped minivan. Uh, that is when the planes were functional, because sometimes the soldiers would drink shit out of them trying to get drunk. There were several like different planes you could drink different fluids in, and you would get drunk. The one cargo plane they called the Flying Restaurant because it held so much of these alcoholic chemicals. So at certain times, sorties would be like a sortie is an air mission. So sometimes these missions would be grounded, they'd be canceled because a bunch of shitheads drank their airplanes dry.
He was trying to get drunk.
Yeah, because they weren't legally allowed to buy alcohol. You could actually go to like gulags for shit like that. So what they would do was drink the shit out of planes. Their boot polish also contained ethanol. So what they would take the boot polish and they would spread it on bread and then toast the bread, and that toasting would pull the ethanol out of the boot polish and into the bread, and then they'd scrape off the black shit and then eat it and then get drunk.
Sounds pretty crazy.
Absolutely. I mean, I totally get it. You're in the scary desert and people are shooting missiles at you and all your friends are dead or on heroin and like it I get it. I understand the need for a drink after a day like that. They would also drink their cleaning chemicals. So when it would get cold out, they would leave like oil drip pans full of their version of Clorox or whatever, and it would freeze. So they would remove like half of it would freeze, and they would drink what didn't because that had alcohol. Mind you, this killed a whole bunch of people, like a lot, like thousands.
Well, yeah, I mean,
So
like
now,
they're drinking fucking chemicals and not like liquor. You know what I mean?
well, it is chemically alcohol. It will get you drunk, but there's also all these additives. When out on these patrols, Soviet soldiers were extremely leery of being captured. Like would kill themselves before given the chance, because the Mujahideen would mutilate bodies. You know, cut out eyes, remove fingers, shove dicks in people's mouth, that kind of stuff. So,
Like even if you're gonna be captured, I mean, there's gonna be torture and everything that you're doing, right?
oh yeah, the Mujahideen would try to get officers because they knew the white families would pay. They had money as opposed to the starved in often super poor satellite states around the Soviet Union.
Okay. So yeah, I guess we can get back into the Operation Storm 333. Like the units involved with that too. I mean, there were actually a few on both sides. Now there's the Grum Thunder Unit. That's a unit of Alpha Group, a special purpose center of the KGB, and there were 24 men deployed with that.
Thunder Warriors.
They had a few other commandos there too. There was Zenit Commandos. So these guys are like an elite sabotage and assassination school of the KGB. I believe there were like 30 of them deployed.
Cool.
Now there were also like some paratroopers here. These guys crashed through building gates and stuff. They launched their rockets around that shit. The 345th Independent Guards Airborne Regiment. That was a company of troops that participated in this operation here too. Yeah, so these guys were like a detachment of the USSR Ministry of Defense. They were made up of soldiers from like southern republics of the USSR, and I think they had like 520 men.
Yeah, places like Azerbaijan, Chechnya, maybe. Yeah, but there's a whole diaspora down there of like dozens of nations that no one ever really thinks about.
Yeah, there's a lot that were actually in this whole thing, and they're still into this whole thing. I mean, plus you got to think like the whole Afghan side of things too. There was their military in this too. It just pretty much became the opening act of the Soviet-Afghan War. Now, December 27th, 1979, the presidential palace had threw like a party to show off a bunch of architecture and shit, like a bunch of European decor. There was a golden elevator, if you can believe that. Other fucking cool things, like that gold elevator, I mean, that's fucking top notch. So this is where the president was laid up, so he was in his personal quarters here. So a Soviet cook that prepped for the party had slipped poison into his lunch earlier that day. So they
You
tried
never
to.
trust a Russian cook. Oh my God. Every single time. They. It's frustrating how often the KGB poisons people.
They also had
Uh,
like a similar attempt earlier that week too. They actually left the president unscathed, but his nephew got like deathly ill, and his nephew was evacuated to Moscow for hospital treatment.
Ironic.
Yeah. Now the poison that he drank had actually been mixed into a glass of his Coca-Cola. So this actually in turn diluted the toxin. So yeah, that was like the two poison attempts on this guy here. The week before, and then this one from the Soviet cook. Now, it's a little known fact here, once he got ill, that two Soviet doctors who were totally unaware of the KGB plot, they worked on him at the palace. So, like, his ministers were rushed over to, like, the military hospital and stuff. So the doctors ended up putting tubes through this guy's nose, his mouth, and they started to pump his stomach. They actually poured, like, cold water and shit over him just to save him, right? They
That's
didn't.
so funny that they're so secretive that their own people are like just he's a doctor, so he saved the guy, but he messed up months of Soviet planning. Like the amount of money it took to get that poison into that man's glass is astounding. It took effort and work, and this doctor's just doing his job. He's like, fuck out. When the US was over there, they were still finding live Soviet ordnance. They've deployed millions, and not like purposefully. Sometimes they were dropped out of airplanes, sometimes they were dropped from helicopters. Like it was just scattering bombs that are going to kill children.
And it wasn't long after that Soviet officials in Kabul had cabled Moscow after the second assassination attempt was found to have failed. Because, I mean, they tried to poison this guy twice and nothing happened, right? I mean, he got sick the second time, but, he wasn't fucking near death because he got saved by those Soviet doctors, right? What they did was send up a ground team in to go fuck shit up. So they ordered to begin this whole assault here to finish off the president and then overtake the heavily fortified palace. And they did all this around, I believe, 7:15 p.m. Now the whole place was just brand new, right? Like it totally been refurbished because there was a ton of people here that were invited over to show off this whole new design of the place, all the cool stuff they had. So like there were people mingling inside and outside this whole place. And then all of a sudden, a huge fucking explosion shook the entire place. So panic obviously set in throughout the party goers. The military that were guarding up the place kind of went up in arms. Everybody's panicking now, right?
Yeah.
Now the Soviets killed the Afghans who kind of put up any opposition. You know that they're gonna try to defend their fucking country because they have no idea what the fuck's going on. So the palace was on fire because of the explosion. The 154th had dressed in Afghan uniforms, so they tasked with officially guarding the whole palace grounds. So they were kind of like set in motion before this whole fucking thing even got situated, right?
The putting on Afghan uniforms is so confusing to me. Like it serves zero purpose, and they didn't tell anybody. How do you not tell anybody? Like, ah, I don't know. I've never been in a firefight, but I can assume they're awfully chaotic. And if you look like the bad guy, I mean,
So what these guys did here, like since the whole palace was on fire and everything, right? It was easier for people to fucking go in, do their thing. So the KGB forces just stormed the whole palace here while the Soviet troops provided a ring of security around the whole building. So these guys went floor to floor, battling the presidential guard and the members of the family and everything. So orders were to kill everybody that they met in the palace. Now, as Soviet soldiers, I mean, they were trained to accept orders, don't ask any fucking questions, just do your job kind of thing, right? I
yes.
mean, even in any army, there's going to be someone who has to do the harshest, most horrible fucking tasks. And these are the guys, right? And they ended up killing a lot of people, and they didn't keep count. I mean, why would they, right? And Afghanistan realized their attackers, like,
There was a lot of confusion because a lot of Afghans thought that like them and the Soviets were tight. There was no didn't think there was animosity. Why would they be attacking us?
they thought they were their allies and everything, right? Like, they had no bad blood
Yeah,
between them, right? Now, the president's son here, he was hit by a shrapnel here, and he bled to death. And they ended up, I believe, killing the president, Amin. So they wrapped him up in carpet and they buried them near the palace, and there was no ceremony for them or anything like that. So the whole deed was done. They killed the president of Afghanistan, and the operation was fully complete by the morning of December 28th, 1979. So the president and many of his followers were executed. Deputy Prime Minister at the time, Babrak Karmal, he became Prime Minister of Afghanistan. Now, the current president, Amin, his wife, his daughter, grandchildren, and all that, they were sent to prison. And even before the whole operation, like, Balashov had surveyed the area under the guise of a bodyguard of a Soviet diplomat, so everything was pretty sneaky. Now, his unit knew that there was going to be, like, a whole fucking bunch of death and stuff, and there were some that felt uncomfortable about it, but I mean, they had to follow their orders. About 80% of them were wounded shortly after they left their vehicles here, but they continued on the assault. So the dude that was the new president, he was born Sultan Hussein on January 6, 1929 in Kamari. So he took his schooling up in Najat High School, a German-speaking school, mind you. Then he later went on to Kabul University. So he was the son of Muhammad Hussein Hashim. This guy was a major general in the Afghan army and a former governor of the province of Paktia. And he was also the second of 5 siblings. So when Soviets went in to grab the president and everything here, he was actually laying in bed in his underwear because he was still fighting off the toxins and everything from the poison, right? So when the KGB special forces stormed in the presidential palace, they caught the Afghan president lying in his underwear. And he was actually still groggy from like the poisoning and everything here, and then he was shot and he was executed. So yeah, pretty crazy though. I mean, fuck, a lot of these other guys here, like that kind of tried to follow him and try to help him and everything here, like they were just executed on the spot, right? A lot of his
immediately.
followers and stuff got like just bullets in the back of the neck, right? Even his son died, man. Like he had the whole shrapnel and everything, right? One of his daughters was wounded there, but survived. Yeah, and like even most of this guy's guards, like fuck, he had a bunch of guards in the palace. I believe there was like 40 kicking around here. A lot of them died in the fighting here. Some of the palace actually went up in flames, and some 150 of the 180 palace guards, who were like regular troops here, they ended up surrendering when they realized the attacking troops were from the USSR, not from an Afghan unit.
Yeah, as soon as they figured out what's going on, they're like, "Oh, fuck this."
Yep, we're done.
Was the
So yeah,
golden elevator okay?
I hope so. I think they melted it down and brought it back with them. No, I don't know.
Because looting is part of war. Uh, that very famous photo of it's oddly enough a Soviet holding the flag out over the Reichstag, black and white, very famous picture. But when the USSR put that picture out, they had to doctor it like old-timey Photoshop because the man had dozens of watches on his arm that he had stolen. And that's not how they wanted people like the world to see their soldiers as just like looting Germany.
Looting's kind of frowned upon during wartime.
Oh, I mean, depends on who.
Oh yeah, and it was pretty crazy here too. Like even there was like fuck thousands of Soviet troops here, hundreds of planes and tanks ended up crossing into Afghanistan, and after they took the whole place. So that would have been in the following days. I believe they used 9 armored troop carriers. This was crewed by troops of the Spetsnaz battalion. Now, some of these vehicles actually carried like 54 members of the KGB. The official announcement of this guy's death came on Kabul radio here. So this was reported by the New York Times on December 27th, 1979, that Amin had been sentenced to death at a revolutionary trial for crimes against the state, and that the sentence had been carried out. And then the Minister for Defense had later confirmed this guy's death. Now, during the whole thing, some recall that there was so much firing and fucking explosions and everything that you couldn't hear anything. Like, everything was just tearing right through the night. The Soviets were throwing hand grenades, they were firing rockets, using Kalashnikovs. Now, these are like
Also,
the
weapon, their heavy machine gun, called the Dushka, is a 50 caliber, but the bullets are bigger than a traditional 50 cal.
Okay.
And it's, I don't know, it's one of the most devastating.
Yeah, so all these guys pretty much rolled in using like the most widely used shoulder weapon in the world. So that was the Kalashnikov.
Yeah, Kalashnikov was a dude, it's a name.
Yeah.
So is Dragunov,
Oh, okay.
the sniper rifle.
Yeah.
And the same guy who designed that also made the Dushka.
Oh shit. Small world. So the initials AK represent Avtomat Kalashnikova, which is Russian for automatic Kalashnikov. So, AK, right? So its designer, Mikhail Timofeyevich Kalashnikov, he designed the weapon back in 1947. So it was recognized as being simple to operate, pretty rugged, and reliable under trying conditions. It was built around a 7.62 millimeter round with a muzzle velocity of some 700 meters per second. So it had a cyclic firing rate of 600 rounds per minute and was capable of both semi-automatic and automatic fire. Now it had a long curved box magazine, held about 30 rounds, and a separate gas return tube above the barrel. This held a piston that was forced back upon firing to activate the mechanisms that ejected the spent cartridge and cocked the hammer for the next round. So all in all, it was a good weapon. But I mean, everything has its downsides, right? Despite their obvious advantages and everything, the AK-47 and the AKM were considered by the Soviet military to have problems with accuracy, mainly because recoil forces generated by the powerful 7.62 millimeter round. Obviously, like, there's going to be blowback and everything that were generated here by the weapons, right? Just because of, like, the heavy internal mechanisms and shit. I mean, these assault rifles.
Brutal. It's brutal. It's more brutal than it needs to be because it's Soviet.
Well, yeah. I mean, these assault rifles remain the basic shoulder weapons of, like, many armies, too. I mean, once had political...
Oh, for decades.
Well, yeah. I mean, even with the armies that once had political and military ties to the Soviet Union, right? Like, they fucking favored this weapon here. Like, guerrilla nationalist movements and everything throughout the world for many years, too, right? So, I mean...
For the length of its life, the Soviets would just pour weapons on any nation that even like looked at a Karl Marx book. Like it's one of the reasons why like it was so violent in Eastern Europe after the fall of the Soviet Union is because everybody had tanks and machine guns and no one to answer to anymore. Not a great idea, just bathing the world in 7.62.
Now, during the whole thing, I believe over 100 of the KGB troops were killed before the palace was taken and the president was gunned down. Now, the assault was pretty much led by like 2 elite units. They were Alpha and Zenith. So the Alpha unit targeted Amin, and then Zenith unit had the task of collecting the factual evidence that Amin was actually collaborating with the United States. So this is the angle that they were playing. Both units were brought to Afghanistan secretly, and then they blended with Muslim battalions to make an impression that the operation was carried out by locals, where in reality it was just all the work of these 2 units. the whole Soviet invasion. It's a pretty fucking bad day, right? Darkest day of fucking Afghanistan. Because I mean, the
And
misery
but then
just
it just got worse.
well, yeah, the
For
misery
a
just kept
decade,
taking
it
over.
just got worse.
Well, yeah, and people in most countries, like around the world, like they disliked what the Soviet Union did in
Oh
Afghanistan.
yeah, people
I mean,
boycotted the Olympics because of it.
well, yeah, I mean, even they enjoyed how the Afghanistan people were actually fighting it and everything, right? And even by the mid 1980s, like many groups in Afghanistan had organized themselves to fight the Soviet troops. And all those like groups had actually received help from many countries like the US, United Kingdom, China, Saudi Arabia,
Dude,
Pakistan.
everybody.
Well, even Pakistan thought that the Soviet war in Afghanistan was also a threat, since the countries both share a border.
Yeah.
Now, yeah, they didn't want to fuck with anything, right? So they started helping them. Now, during the war, like the economy, like I said, like definitely suffered badly. Grain production came down to like 3.5% per year between 1978 and 1990. So, pretty big hit. And the Soviets also tried to bring commercial and industrial activities under state control, which also had a bad effect on the economy. Now, with the breakup of the Soviet Union in many countries, Afghanistan's traditional trade here also further suffered.
Well, I mean, they still had the heroin.
And I believe the whole total time lasted for the whole attack was like 9 years, 1 month, 3 weeks, and 1 day. And the U.S. even played a side role in the whole event here too.
Oh, a
So,
massive role.
well, yeah, because fuck, they had to help them out too, right? For like the Afghan resistance fighters and the diplomatic efforts to try to get the Soviets to withdraw, right?
Not just arms, they supplied the infamous Stinger missile, surface-to-air, shoulder-launched missile that was great at taking down Soviet helicopters. And it came at a time too where pilots felt invincible. No, so taking that comfort and safety away from them was huge.
Yeah,
Plus, not getting blown up by helicopters is like pretty cool.
no, definitely.
It's like my third favorite thing.
Yeah, and the United States even like they decided to funnel Soviet-made weapons and money to the rebels through Pakistan. This was an effort known as Operation Cyclone. And even
Also,
as
fucking cool name.
yeah, see, Operation Cyclone. Yeah, I mean, even at its height, the American aid to the rebels reached like 400 million per year. That's a lot of fucking money.
Crazy. That's a lot of AK-47s.
Tons. There was also one dude during the attack here. He actually laid in wait. I think he went up there for like 7 hours. He was laying in wait. So
Jesus.
he heard one of his buddies' voice outside here. So he came out and he was arrested along with his colleague. So he was sentenced to death. And then he was transferred over to the notorious prison Puli Charkhi outside of Kabul. Now, some may know this as like the Afghan National Detention Facility. It's a maximum security prison. This opened up back in the 80s here. I think it can house somewhere between like 14,000 inmates. And I think there's like 70 female prisoners that are housed in like a special female section of the prison too. So they got it whole thing separated. Now, the prison has been renovated in recent years with assistance from the U.S. And there was this other fella here, like after the whole attack here, he woke up in a local hospital. He was actually piled up among with a bunch of dead bodies. He actually realized the dude was still alive and he was taken to hospital or whatever. And he actually stayed in the hospital for 13 months recovering from his wounds and shit.
Good lord.
Yeah, I mean, think
I mean, there's a lot of sad moms. As far as Aftermath goes, there was no real goal achieved. I mean, besides killing a bunch of teenage boys.
the whole aftermath, like the whole storming of the palace, like Soviet forces wrapped the bodies of, I believe, the president, Amin. And, yeah, like they put him all up in carpets and he's now in an unmarked grave. And their bodies have never been found.
The unmarked grave thing is kind of a thing with the Soviets. A lot of the graves they left behind went unmarked or were considered mass.
I mean, I don't personally think it makes a lot of sense, but I'm not the geopolitical leader of the Soviet Union.
I mean, you gotta have goals.
But that's the thing with this conflict is there really wasn't any. They were just occupying ground. And then they'd have battle, like they'd fight to claim new ground and then lose the old stuff the second they took their foot off it. There was no
Like gain.
ever for 10 years. It's just sending teenagers in an armored minivan to go die in the scary desert. And when I was talking about the hazing, I touched with it the grandfather system. After you've been there a year, you're what's called a grandfather. So every couple of years, the soldiers on the ground would change completely. You get a fresh batch, all fresh recruits. The Mujahideen didn't have that problem. They didn't have new guys. I mean, apart from some foreign fighters, but like the experience that they gained stayed on the battlefield. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no,
It's the people fighting, whereas there was no real experienced people fighting for the Soviets. Because they were going home. No one was re-enlisting any longer than they had to. A lot of these guys were conscripted, so they weren't even there by choice. And again, no one's wearing socks.
no. And that's a pretty bad fucking thing. Those are essential.
It's a desert that gets ice cold. Like, how the fuck? I don't know. But speaking of footwear, if you look at a lot of those pictures, especially of Spetsnaz units, they're all wearing tennis shoes.
Yeah, you want to explain those photos right quick?
Those are Mokhbas. So when the Olympics was held in Moscow, they wouldn't allow foreign-made like equipment. So like Adidas set up a factory to make tracksuit. That's one of the reasons why tracksuits are so like popular in like Gopnik culture. But these knockoff Adidas called Mokhbas were like a status symbol. Because these guys weren't paid very much, and it was essentially like a month's salary on shoes. Knockoff Adidas, specifically. They were made in the same factory Adidas were made, just after the company itself left. Sorry, I keep bringing up the no socks thing because that's so crazy to me. Like, even the boots they were issued weren't very good. They were jack boots, so they're literally just nailed together. Crazy shit. I think the war would have continued much longer if if the Soviet government didn't just fall apart. So, in my research, I was looking for, just on anything, and there's not a lot of memorials.
No.
Communists love their memorials. They're like giant statues and gaudy shit. This conflict doesn't have that. And I think it's because they're ashamed. It was evil. Like, true evil. You take a round from a village and then you just wipe it off the face of the map. Something that's been there for hundreds of years. Like, the veterans themselves had to make their own mutual aid groups. There wasn't the government that sent them to war was gone. They're not getting a pension. And the $10 a month they made while in country is not enough to live on. That was the pay, $10 a month. Adjusted for inflation. I mean, there were other ways to make money too. Smuggling was a great big problem. Because, again, at the time, Afghanistan was one of the largest heroin producing places on the planet.
Interesting.
Yeah. Which that itself led to the high addiction rate that I mentioned earlier. Like, it was like 50-something%, like half And again, it's killing people. People are overdosing all the time. Because remember, suicides, friendly fire, and drug overdoses produced more casualties than the enemy did.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, you're more likely to take yourself out or your buddy than it's. I don't know. And that's got to be horrifying to just be 1,000 miles away from home. And you can't trust anybody to not kill you. Nobody. You have no socks. You're underfed. The bullets you were supposed to use on patrol were sold by your officer so he can drink. Like, in Zinky Boys, there's 1,000 little horrifying stories like that. Yeah. Oh, I probably should have said something earlier, but for sources, I'm going off of the book Zinky Boys. I cannot pronounce the author's name. And Afghansi by... Fuck, I'll send you the bibliography I have.
Yeah, that's cool.
Al Jazeera has a wonderful series of interviews with veterans.
Okay.
Yeah. And the one gentleman ran a museum out of his house because there's no like state funded like museum. So the guy converted his house into one, and he's got like his helmet, pieces of his friend's uniform, shit like that. Touch back on addiction. Alcoholism has been part of specifically Russian, you could almost say culture at this point, is to be too drunk. During this time, the production of vodka was state run, and it was sold in a bottle that once you opened it, you couldn't put the lid back on. So it's because to them, like, one bottle was a serving size.
Yeah.
I don't know. With all the crazy little details of the war, I'm shocked we don't like. I'm surprised there's no movies or like a video game or something. Like, I'm surprised there's not more media around this because it's super interesting and twisted as fuck. And I don't know. Yeah, this wasn't the most comprehensive deep dive into the subject, but like, hopefully it'll inspire people to look into it because there's shit that I don't know. It's crazy that people let this happen to other people.
Oh,
It's a level of malicious, intentional incompetence. Like, if someone just told the man no, none of this would have happened.
but it did. That's why we're talking about it.
So I can't say favorite, but on a like one of the positive sides, the one of the aftermath of this is the holdouts. There were Soviet holdouts in Afghanistan. So when the US invaded, sometimes they'd go into these little backwater towns out from the cities, and there'd be like just some random white guy who converted to Muslim and is living peacefully with his goats and his wife, and like some dudes just stayed. This communism shit sucks. I'm gonna stay with these goats, which, I mean, I can understand that at least. That and the landmines, they still mess people up.
Well, I mean, I assume there's tons of landmines.
Well, they would blanket whole grid squares, like a kilometer by kilometer. They would just dump that. It's area denial to keep people out or control movement or what have you. And plus, the Mujahideen being it's a guerrilla force, they have relatively few vehicles. So if you could take out the vehicles, they can't replace that movement. That mobility is just gone. Also, not a man. I transitioned about a decade ago. I just smoke cigarettes and don't care what my voice sounds like.
Ah, perfect. What made you want to switch over?
Oh, I just was.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can buy my own clothes now. I'm gonna wear what I want.
That's fucking awesome.
I tried my hand doing comedy there for a year. I got into the punk scene for a while, so I lived in a punk house for like a decade. We would do shows in the basement, and our kitchen had this big hole in the floor because we dropped a hot water heater. And my friend Vern and I would sit in lawn chairs in the kitchen and pass beers down the hole for $1.
That's fucking awesome. And even thinking like the Soviet Army, like they also lost hundreds of aircraft. Like
An absurd amount of equipment. Helicopters. Helicopters were the big thing that the Stingers were great at taking down.
Yeah.
So you have these pilots who, at this point, are cocky. You know what I mean? They think they're invincible, but now they're able to be plucked out of the sky. What was it? 1 in 27 shots brought down a helicopter. That's how good the Stinger was. I know it doesn't sound good, but like that's better than what they had. Before the Stinger, it was the RPG-7, which is it's the one everybody pictures in their head when you say rocket launcher, with the big green cone coming out the front. But those aren't smart. You can't like control that at all. I think Stinger was radar or heat. I don't remember. So it was a little cherry on top of the shit sundae. Even after the soldiers were brought back to their respective home countries, when they died, they weren't given a headstone because it wasn't supposed to be public knowledge that this many people are dying. They wasted everybody's fucking time, money, and lives to prove a point that was forgotten. Like,
yeah.
It's just pointless missions in a pointless war. It was hubris, plain and simple. And it cost a world power its world powerness.
Well, exactly.
You kicked yourself off the podium. History is so fucking fascinating because it's like everyone else's history, but 10,000 extra people die and everyone was drunk. Like, it's an insane place. I can't imagine millions of people living like that.
No. But I mean, like, yeah, they fucking killed that president, dude. Everything else went to shit after that. So, I mean, what do you do?
What do? You drink an airplane dry and get the fuck back out there.
All right, well, thank you very much for popping on here.
Killer, man, I'm gonna let you go.
Twisted Tales.